brief as possible, and really just wanted to spend a little bit of time going through, let's see here. So high level, want to talk about just the blockchain ecosystem, maybe how to get involved, a little bit about my background, what I'm doing now, and like kind of next steps for people. There's been a lot of presentations today about different streams in crypto and blockchain, and wanted to just like kind of, I guess it's suitable that I'm last here because I'm hoping to just kind of wrap things up and give some ideas to people. So there's this whole idea about digital scarcity and abundance, which I'll talk about in a few slides. But I guess first I'll do a very brief overview of me and kind of where I got started. So I'm based in Calgary. I grew up here, was born originally in Ontario. I started my career in Calgary as like an IT admin, moved on to IT consulting, working for like Apple and doing some consulting projects for a small consultancy. Went back to school, did my MBA out east. I lived in Halifax for 8 years, and then moved to Toronto and became a project manager for a blockchain startup. And that's really kind of the turning point where after that event, I was fully engrossed in the ecosystem and kind of no looking back after that. So that led to creating my own business. So I didn't really consider myself an entrepreneur. It was creating corporations out of the necessity to earn money. Most of the clients that I was working for were in the US. So creating a US corporation owned by a Canadian corporation, owned by a Canadian citizen, which is myself. And some of the tales that Keegan was saying, as well as I'm sure a lot of people on this stream right now, about as a business owner, how just these loans and debt and banks kind of don't look at you until you have 5 to 10 years of runway and very consistent revenue. And so that was kind of a head scratcher to me too, where it's like, okay, well, I'm doing something productive, starting a business, but I'd be better off if I worked at McDonald's with a steady paycheck. And so that interesting kind of perspective about how society is structured really reinforces some of the core tenets of blockchain, being your own bank, being responsible for your own wealth and store value. So those are messages that definitely resonate with the entire blockchain community. So after a couple of years of running my own business, I started at Hut 8. So Hut 8 is a Bitcoin mining company that was started in 2018. They're based in Alberta, and they have 2 sites. So as I mentioned, I started with Hut 8 last February. So I'm just about in my first 12 months with Hut 8. And as head of technology, I have a couple main focuses. One is horizontal to the whole organization, as like a typical head of, or I guess a technologist would be. So, like making sure email works and our tools and software and laptops and security and kind of that aspect to it. But given our industry and the line of business Hut 8 operates in, technology is also vertical through the organization. So it's the main line of business. We're using advanced computers, whether they're ASIC or GPUs, to mine cryptocurrency, as well as looking at other opportunities. Last week, Hut 8 announced that they acquired a traditional data center in Western Canada with a couple locations in Ontario as well. And we're looking at other opportunities in the space, as well as kind of a straight up diversification for revenue stream. Hut 8 has kind of become more notable recently of their HODL strategy. So we haven't sold any Bitcoin that has been mined over the last year. We have one of the, I think, the largest Bitcoin on balance that was self-mined. And while that's interesting, I think as the industry has matured, now we can start doing things more and more with that Bitcoin. So there's, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, and again, Keegan touched on this as well, where when I was working in Toronto as a product manager for a blockchain startup, there were companies around us who'd have their bank accounts closed by like RBC, Scotiabank. Like they're a tech startup that's working in the blockchain space, and they can't even get access and maintain standard bank accounts or get access to loans. So it's really interesting and kind of bizarre. And then of course, in the mining sector, you would have no access to debt. And so there was not really ability for you to hold your Bitcoin unless you're financing it somewhere else. So with the advancement of the industry and more comfort with, I guess, collateralizing Bitcoin or public markets, that strategy has enabled Hut 8 to hold the majority of its Bitcoin now. I think our balance sheet is around 5,500 at the moment. So I won't talk too much about mining. I think I'll get back to it a little bit later. But I really wanted to talk about these like big themes, largely around technology and internet and where some of these paradigms come in that we've been talking about today. So, you know, Web 1.0, it's if you think about what the permissions of that architecture was, it was largely read-only, right? You would find a blog, find a newspaper online, find some content, you would read it. That's kind of it. You would move on to the next thing. One of the most powerful things there was, of course, the zero marginal cost. It didn't cost the newspaper, it didn't cost the blog incremental fees if another person read their site. So it introduced this thing that's quite influential in business, is zero marginal cost. But because it was new, it wasn't widespread. It was still largely local. So like your local newspaper, if they were savvy, would have like a website. You would find local services using a variety of different search engines on that same platform. So it was very much like a Yellow Pages, if anyone ever remembers what those are, or like this like read only. And of course, the convergence of the technology, I think, that helped move out of this paradigm was like high-speed internet. And so here in North America, we've enjoyed high-speed internet for quite a while, and I think that kind of sped us through into the next paradigm. And along with the advancement of web to Web 2.0 is like interactivity. So instead of static web pages, the tools advance, developers get creative. There's like technologies that layer on top of this basic infrastructure of servers and HTTP and TCP, all these protocols that helped Web 1 get started, get advanced in Web 2. And now there's a new paradigm shift where it's read and write, where now you are contributing to the content of the internet in your daily life. There's still zero marginal costs, but it's more global in nature or more in your social network. So who do you follow? Who do they follow? What are they posting? And one of the major technologies that helped the convergence of this was smartphones. So people had now a camera in their pocket. They had text message everywhere. They could email. And this kind of precipitated more global adoption, because while high-speed internet was great in North America, infrastructure in the rest of the world, it was too expensive to do. And one of the most impactful things that I ever did in my life was travel. And I distinctly remember I was on a like basically on a boat in the middle of Cambodia, uh, because we couldn't take a bus because the roads were being built or impossible to drive, and we were in the middle of basically a community that was built on the water. And I remarked on people had smartphones, people had cell phones there. And so that was a really interesting moment in 2009, 2008, yeah, around there. Where it's like this is a big difference. This is a convergence of technology, of culture, of people. And so now that they have access to information, what else is going to happen? And this is, I think, a lot of the narrative and the rhetoric around blockchains, how this Web 3.0 paradigm, where yes, you can read and write and monetize, and the first obvious use case is currency, because you can distribute it globally. There's no marginal costs, and it has a store of value. Um, and so I think that's a pretty obvious use case, and that's why Bitcoin is a great use case, and other cryptos have slightly different use case, but largely hold to that same value proposition because of the inherent structures of how we got to Web 3.0. Now, I think there's some trade-offs. Not everything needs to be monetized.